So I've been pondering since the last council meeting your legal opinion with regards to not having to get a third-party independent review, which is something that we as council said we wanted to do with those flood properties. And on top of that, I know I talked to Matt Cordonier. There is a brownfield grant that they're wanting the county to do, but the county doesn't want to do it in 2 stages. They want to do the cleanup and the benching at the same time, where this is opposite. And so they're kind of, and plus they need to fund it up front at that $850,000. So there's a lot of unknowns and what's happening.
Well, you said a lot more things than I'm aware of. It was brought to my attention that this firm has been used by the city of Findlay in past for its own projects. They're coming in to look at this property for environmental concerns and provide a report. It just seems odd to me, having used them before. I understand that there's a good reputation with the gentleman that runs this entity, which I don't have my legal opinion in front of me or that contract. But to me, to expend funds to supervise, have one firm supervise another firm, is how it was provided to me. It doesn't seem to be have a good cost-benefit analysis to the city of Findlay. We're hiring somebody and paying them X dollars to supervise another firm that's got an obligation to provide services, and that we're aware of their services in the past and their credibility. That's the nature of my opinion.
Rob, I appreciate those comments, because if that's what was shared with you, I believe you were misled. The purpose of us hiring a party that was a third party to represent the interests of the city of Findlay, as I pushed for and as this council felt was worth doing, was to have an outstanding third party not related to the work going on absolve us, satisfy us with an expertise that none of us have. There's been inferred expertise. There's been people quote reports. There's been things missed. There's been things omitted. There's been things. I love the headline in the paper where it said, dirt was moved. There was arsenic. We don't know if it was removed or just moved, but it's not there now. There have been so many things happen here, and here's the way I think about it for the benefit of this council, because I believe if you don't do it, I believe you're making a mistake, and more importantly, as an elected official, I'm going to talk about it for the rest of my career here at the city. And that is, whenever a mother pushes a child in a stroller through a park and that baby drops that pacifier on the ground, the mother does one thing. They pick the pacifier up, they lick it off, and they put it in that baby's mouth. And if you can't assure those mothers that that dirt is clean, then by God, we didn't do our job. And I don't think any one of us in this room has the qualifications to make sure that that pacifier would be clean. And if you think about it any other way, that's for you folks, but I think it's that serious.
I would concur that it is that serious, and as was discussed at the meeting and as was stated, is that environmental expertise, these individuals that would be providing this service to the community have a credential that they are upheld to and their licensure. And when they enter into a contract to provide services, as this project is set out to do, which is to set it to the park and open space standard, and I think we actually talked about the residential standard, which has an even higher. If you remember in the meeting, he said kids need to be able to eat like 10 feet down of dirt and be safe. No one here is making light of the responsibility that we all have to make sure there is a safe environment. I will be taking my nieces and nephews to play in this space. So we all understand that responsibility. What we are saying is we do not need to hire and waste taxpayer dollars on hiring a person with the same licensure to supervise and sign off that the person that the county is paying as part of this project, and really us as passed through with this grant, are hiring somebody to do when they have that same expertise and responsibility. As was discussed at the meeting, yes, there was this additional review of the surrounding parcels. The Rainick property was the main contaminant. That was the county's property that they were helping manage. The city then had these other properties, and we said we want a more formal review. Had we not done that, the county would have just done it as part of the benching project. They still would have had to clear out that dirt. They still would have had to separate it if it had met the different standards of levels, just as they did when they did the Swale Park project. If you recall, they knew they were going to get into stuff. They had to remove more dirt than expected. The cost of different aspects of it went down. So that is completely, the scope of work and the outcome that will occur is no different if we pay somebody to sit there and babysit the person who is responsible to make sure that we're meeting that criteria.
Remind me, what was the dollar amount for us to have that third party?
I do not
Ballpark.
recall.
Great example of the point being hidden or obfuscated. The point is not, does somebody need to babysit the consultant? The point is, and has always been, going all the way back to the discussion in the Strategic Planning Committee, who is the fiduciary for the city of Findlay? And as the fiduciary, and as a third-party review, did the process that was implemented satisfy us to know that things have been done correctly and adequately? Not the fiduciary of the county, not the fiduciary of the Conservancy District, not Steve Wilson's fiduciary, our fiduciary, protecting the taxpayers of the city of Findlay, because we have to live with all the contamination that is left in that ground, that is subject to the runoff, that is subject to the river flowing for the rest of the time that we own that property, which will be ad infinitum as long as this country is in existence. So for us not to hire a fiduciary to obfuscate the point by saying we don't want to babysit somebody, that's playing politics. Let's keep this on the subject. The subject is, does the city need a fiduciary to supervise this and determine that the process protects the taxpayer of the city of Findlay?
And that trickles down to me, to the city of Findlay. So I'm not quite sure how you're asking that. There's nothing in the contract that says the city of Findlay is included. It does say that this contract does include any assignees or transferees of the those kind of things like that, which would make us a third-party beneficiary down the road.
So
You don't
in
have
this
to,
case,
I mean,
then-
council doesn't have to do anything with my opinion. It's just an opinion. You guys can still discuss whether or not to have a third party to supervise the project or give an independent report. I just gave an opinion, and it's just my
Ms.
opinion.
Frische.
So I guess I would say if we ever came up to a property that we wanted to take ownership of and we didn't know the condition of it, it wouldn't be abnormal or unreasonable for us to do an independent, whether somebody did a study of it or not 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 months ago. We would do that to do our due diligence. And I thought that's what we determined, going back from my memory, sitting in those meetings when we talked about a third party. Is phase 2 gonna cover all of this in this project? Because you got the county who's out of money, right? And that's why I brought up the memorandum agreement for taking responsibility with just that one grant dollar. If the money is not there, and if we go in and we bench it and then do it a second time through for the $850,000 section, we're double doing things, we're moving things around. And the part 2 is CEC, we used them, now the county's using them. I don't know that we have an independent review anymore at this point. And I think whether it's $10,000 or $100,000, we have a responsibility to the community to make sure we did our due diligence to a residential status. In strategic planning, our recommendation was to do this. This was a smart thing to do. And either we're backpedaling on it because the city's coffers have troubles and we're trying to cut corners, which I hope that's not it. But we want to move this project forward and figure out what that park area is going to look like, and if my grandkids or your kids are going to be safe playing on it. And you can say, I'm going to take my nieces and nephews there. Great. Maybe in 10 or 20 years, you might see a reflection of what caused that. Maybe you wouldn't, but I'm not the expert. And that's why we pay for contracts to cover our butt that we did our due diligence. And I want it on the record, I don't support not moving forward and doing our due diligence, because it's inappropriate and wrong.
Councilwoman Frische has mentioned a couple times now that, so this question is to Jeremy. So what sampling did the city do where we found more contaminants? She's talking about these additional spots, and what is she referring to? Was there a separate investigation that we paid for, or?
Yeah, that was the one that was completed that went through the planning meeting for that I believe is Mike Coonfair came in from CC to talk about it. There was additional same plan that we did across there that was authorized by you guys to do that, to see what it was look like, and then As the mayor was saying, that's where we found out the standards of what are residential. You had to dig down 10 feet, and then a park situation has to be a 2 foot of clear fill to be classified as a clear site for that. So that's where additional borings were done and soil testing was done, environmental study was done in that area in multiple areas across more broad than what the county was needing. The county was pretty much, and Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but they were, like you were saying, concentrating in their isolated areas where they were for sure needing cleanups on that, and then we addressed the rest of 19 acres across.
Mayor,
So they, over the years, obviously flood mitigation has been going on for a really long time. They had done different phase 1 assessments, and then in certain key hotspots done additional phase 2 assessments. Previously, what was going to occur is that the commissioners knew there were some main areas that were going to be problematic, Rainick, for example, and that there had been other issue areas. They knew that they were going to have to address it as part of benching, because as part of that structure, the end use intent is parks and green space. Therefore, they will have to clean it to that standard. What we decided as part of the conversations was to move forward with additional environmental review of that entire area. So we
The
went
phase
forward.
2.
We got the phase 2 assessments, which identified area hotspots of mercury, hotspots of arsenic, those different levels. Really, it gave us more information, which is great, and got us to be able to get the brownfield remediation funding. However, had that not been done, when the benching was done and they were doing the soil sampling that is required for this, they would have just had to then separate, and that would have added some additional costs. So we've had a couple of different phases of iteration. Now the brownfield can be done, and I know one of the concerns is, oh, we're gonna remove soil and then have to add soil back in, and we have plenty of soil from different construction sites that we can throw back in, or we can fence it off and leave it if we're gonna break ground in a couple months. So we're meeting with the commissioners on Thursday to work through how we get that done, because it does benefit the community as a whole. The county has has appropriated their flood mitigation funds to different projects, including the remaining of their funds towards the Norfolk Southern Railroad Bridge, just as the city has set aside funds. So they're not out of flood money, they just have it earmarked for other things at this point in time. And again, the brownfield grant would be a reimbursement grant. I would request that, since it was previously on the record of council saying they wanted to hire a third-party fiduciary, I think council should also go on the record with a vote saying that you're okay with it, as long as the county is, maintains the standards that are set forth for the parks and open space or residential requirement. And I can confirm how that is, how that's going to be written, so that is on the record if you would like that.
I just wanted, Dan, you asked Jeremy those questions and he kind of gave you a little detail, but we ended up with surprises. So the Rainick property was like this, and then we dug and it kept getting bigger and deeper, and it was spread further than we realized. We got all the way down to bedrock. When we hit bedrock, we had green slime coming up out of the ground, right? So I don't think that sounds pretty to me. The same thing over on the west side of Main Street when I call it the Huntington lot. We thought there was going to be a small tank there. They ended up pulling out a massively huge tank, double or triple the size of what we thought. So there's surprises. And by doing our due diligence of having our independent third party, we're just helping. It's not we're saying we're babysitting anybody. We're saying you guys did your work, but maybe they just didn't sample in that area or something. I mean, we have to do our due diligence because there's been too many surprises. And would you want to just let these surprises keep happening, or no before we take possession? Right now, the county's on first base. I don't want to be on first base and then have surprises.
Mr. Stasiak.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate your question. I think the numbers were, I think they did 67 test bores, 21 of them came back with contamination. It was significant. And the interesting thing too, I've heard two numbers tonight. I've heard 10 foot for housing and 2 foot for park. But unless somebody wants to say something different, we're only going down 2 foot. And I would even suggest, and I'm not an expert, but 50 years from now, how's somebody going to know 2 foot below grade there's likely contamination in that park? 1 out of 3 holes a kid digs is likely to have something if they dig below 2 foot. So we ought to at least do some type of barrier. There ought to be something done. The question was, and what it really boiled down to, was the county represents the county and they want to move forward, and they took we'll deal with things as we find them. To Holly's point, they weren't finding them. We found them. And then they had to deal with them, and I'm grateful for that. And if we find more things as we move forward, or have somebody just watch out for the city's interests, that's great. And if you guys are satisfied that the county might find them, that's great. But it wasn't a question of babysitting. It's a question of, was the process adequate? And as we move forward in the future, are people going to be adequately protected? And I'll look forward to hearing what you guys decide.
I'm phrasing the question in this manner. Is council satisfied that our fiduciary needs will be satisfied by the county, the firm hired by the county as part of this process? That would be an aye vote. The alternative to that is no, you don't feel that's the case. If the nay votes would win, then we would expect to see legislation for us to go out and hire another firm. So the aye vote is we believe that our needs are satisfied, and that that was the strategic planning desire, which was affirmed by council. A nay vote says no, we do not believe, as currently exists with the county's engineering department, that satisfies the needs. Questions on clarifications on the question, Ms.
Grant, I don't know how you can ask that question. Have you reviewed the contract that the county has with CEC to know what level that they're going to grade-wise? And is it the same thing that we as the city of Findlay are wanting? Or is their review not to the standard that we were expecting? We haven't seen it. So how can you ask that question of council?